All right, Jordan, moving right along. Like I said, uh, football is back. Clemson officially had their media day this week. Clemson kind of uniquely does this leading up to ACC media days every year. Dabo kind of makes the staff available. And man, did he make the staff available this year? I think every coach, their wife, their kids, their extended family, like every coach was available for media days. We heard from pretty much everybody from all the position coaches, the OC, the DC, obviously, and then Dabo wrapping it up at the end of Clemson media days, making some funny comments and jokes about Brian Kelly and him having a shop down in Florida and performing to a small crowd with the Florida Georgia line story that he told the media there that was pretty hilarious. But with all that said, Clemson media days, we heard a lot. We heard from a lot of the position coaches, pretty much every position coach. We heard from Dabo Swinney. Anything that really stood out for you in Clemson media days, whether it was from Dabo or Garrett Riley or Tom Allen or any of the position coaches, what kind of stood out to you from Clemson media day as you kind of went through the interviews and watched them?
Yeah, I mean, I was very interested in hearing about the new faces. Obviously, the biggest additions to the defensive staff, of course, being Tom Allen, of course, Ben Boulware at linebacker coach, and Tom Allen Jr., who gave some insightful things too. But I think what really stuck out to me was Tom Allen just talking about how they kind of stripped everything down and rebuilt how they did things. I think when you talk about the problems that Clemson had over the last couple of years under the previous defensive staff, you saw, obviously I don't think it was so much of a game plan issue. Like I don't think it was anything they did wrong in the film room. But I think there was very much a lackadaisical, I don't want to say lackadaisical, but there was a passive kind of mindset in practice, in preparation that I think played itself out on game day. I mean, they practiced how they played a lot of the time, and that was the biggest problem with Clemson's defense, especially last season. I mean, I don't think Wes Goodwin's scheme was bad and his game plans were bad. I think he's a very smart defensive mind, but obviously there was not the presence during the week and especially on the field that made players want to play with the intensity that they were expected to play at. And given the standard that's here at Clemson, that just wasn't acceptable. And so hearing Tom Allen say all those things about how he went back and reviewed everything that the previous staff did and said, we are rebuilding the foundation from the ground up. I thought that was, I think if you're a Clemson fan, that's extremely refreshing to hear, because watching the performances that Clemson had, especially in the last few games of the season. I mean, Clemson gave that. Shout out to my boy Dustin Black over on Twitter. He actually did the numbers on this. The last 4 games for Clemson, they gave up a total of 1,001 rushing yards.
Good Lord.
That's between the Citadel, South Carolina, SMU, and Texas. They gave up 1,001 rushing yards. That is for those of you at home that that don't like to do math, that's an average of 250 rushing yards allowed per game.
That's a total collapse on defense. I mean, when you're thinking about it, it's just a total collapse on defense. And I like that you started with Tom Allen, because one of the things that stand out to me with him is I like all the stuff about how personal he is with his players and how intentional he is with getting to know them on a personal level and understanding what makes them tick and why they do what they do, right? But I just like how honest he is about how unacceptable Clemson's defense was from a preparation standpoint. He makes it very clear that all the athletes are there to field a top level defense. But as you mentioned, there was kind of a lack of intensity in Clemson's preparation, and he keyed on it like from jump, right? Watching the practice tape, watching the game tape, just a lack of intensity that, as you mentioned, started out in practice and obviously transferred over into the game. And there wasn't that level of intensity or accountability or just holding people to the standard. And that stat that you shared at the end was, I mean, that's a perfect example of how poorly Clemson's defense played in stretches last season. That 1,000-yard stat in the last 4 games, just rushing yards alone, is absolutely insane, and it's unacceptable. And I remember numerous times last year after games when me and you were doing the post game lives, and we were talking about how and these were following wins, mind you, and we would be talking about man, what. We're just giving up these explosive plays and over and over again. It's like we were broken records on these post-game lives, even though we were winning. It just on the defensive side of the ball just did not look good. And sometimes we'd be like, yeah, I mean, we put in some reserve guys, but that's still not acceptable. I think Tom Allen has been refreshing in the fact that he's not shying away from. There were some serious problems on Clemson's defense, and I'm here to fix those problems. So I like that. I like that level of honesty.
Absolutely. He's very to the point about and matter of fact and how he says things. I definitely think that translates to his coaching style, but and probably with a little bit more force in his voice when he's doing it. I mean, the word around the building, it feels like it. I'm not calling him Brent Venables, but that voice, that presence, that gravity about him when he speaks and when he gives instruction and when he coaches, it's reminiscent of that. And obviously, I think when you're playing defense, I mean, you kind of have to have that. I mean, it's not even just on the offensive side of the ball where you don't have too many offensive coaches that get loud. Some do, but you can be a calm and reserved and kind of methodical kind of personality on the offensive side of the ball, and because it's a different mindset. You're already attacking. By the nature of the game, the offense is attacking.
Right.
But defensively, playing passive is going to get you beat 100% of the time. There's no point where okay, we play things conservative and close to the vest and lackadaisical or reserved. That's going to get you beat. And so you need to, as a coach, you need to be able to instill the mindset that we're going to play with 110%, all the cliches, but to the end of the whistle. And you didn't see that last year, and that's why you saw so many missed tackles, so many poor run fits, so many missed opportunities on the defensive side of the ball. Because there were plays to be made. I mean, obviously, I think the biggest example was the South Carolina game, because you had so many opportunities to bring the North Sellers down to the ground. I mean, they were getting home.
Had them wrapped up.
Blitzes and pressures were good.
Yeah, they basically had them wrapped up on numerous times in tackles for loss. And then next thing you know, he's 20 yards down the field.
Yep.
And it's just it was mind-numbing to watch. And I thought that another thing that he mentioned that was interesting was he gave the defense homework on tackling drills and techniques and stuff that he wanted them to work on during summer workouts and stuff like that. So I really like the way that he's come in and just been very blatant and honest about Clemson's shortcomings on the defensive side of the ball and just confronting them head on, not shying away from it, not beating around the bush. He's just this was the problem, and this is what we're going to fix this season, right? Or this is what we're trying to currently fix right now. And you even you mentioned the Brent Venables thing, and Ben Boulware mentioned that as well, that it feels like not. And he did mention, to your point, that they are two very different coaches. But that level of intensity that he felt as a player when Brent Venables was the defensive coordinator is what he feels in the building now that Tom Allen has stepped in as the defensive coordinator. And, to your point, explaining the difference in offense and defense and level of intensity that you have to approach the game with, I think that's key in a defensive coordinator. Like, you have to have that intensity. You have to have that dog about you, if you will. On the defensive side of the ball, it's just a completely different mentality. Maybe outside of like offensive line, the offensive side of the ball is not really like that big rah intense mentality, right? That tends to not be on the offensive side of the ball, right?
Yeah.
Maybe outside of the dudes in the trenches.
Which is why I think what Tyler Grisham does is so impressive, because he's very much he's going to get in your grill about things. And so, that's what I think. Just the taking on the personality of the defense, especially, takes on the personality of the person that's coaching them. 100%. And we saw that when Brent Venables was here, and we saw it when Wes Goodwin was the defensive coordinator. And I think if this defense takes on the personality of Tom Allen, I think we'll be okay. And that's the goal, and that's what they talked about, being the mindset going into this season, and the preparation and summer workouts, and of course that'll extend into fall camp. So Tom Allen obviously I think he was a great interview. Another, you mentioned Ben Boulware, and just, we talked about the things he, the on the field stuff and all of that, and talking about Tom Allen, but obviously he got really emotional, just talking about what it meant to play, to coach at his alma mater and get the opportunity. I think of the many guys that have come through the program, especially under Dabo Sweeney. I mean, there's very few I would want to bring in to coach more than Ben Boulware. Just he represents a lot of what Clemson, especially under Dabo, has been about. I think he always was he just has a football mind. He was like that on the field, and that's what made him so great, despite his limitations as an athlete. And so, and he wasn't a poor athlete by any means, but he wasn't a guy that's going to light up the draft combine either. So I think that's I think it says a lot about what he was as a player, and obviously he's a Clemson legend, and a guy that became a champion, and a guy that was unheralded as a recruit. I mean, all of the things that he had to be in order to be a great player. I think he's a perfect guy to try to instill that into his players. And him talking about some of the guys that really stood out to him. He said that the praise he had for Jeremiah Alexander was really really nice to hear. Called him the hardest working kid he's ever been around. And I think that's instructive to kind of what we think about. We feel good about Wade Woodaz and Sammy Brown, of course, but obviously behind that you don't have a whole lot of guys that have played a ton of snaps. But Jeremiah Alexander, you brought him in for a reason. He's a very obvious answer in terms of a guy that you can plug in and use in different ways. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to see him. I mean, he should have been a Tiger to begin with, but I'm glad that he's here now. And so I thought the praise for him was really really nice. And I'm just excited to see the unknown about the linebacker room is probably it's less concerning than it is intriguing, because I do think you have some answers potentially behind your two starters.
Yeah, I agree. It was fun to kind of watch Ben Boulware get choked up there and then try to like hype himself up out of it.
Yeah,
by calling himself.
He tried to be tough. Yeah,
and try to be tough about it. It's okay, man. You can have feelings. We know. We got it. But that honestly, it was just a perfect example of how much this dude eats, breathes, and sleeps Clemson football. This guy is a Clemson guy through and through. His family, he mentioned that his granddad and, pretty much everybody in his family has been involved with the university in some capacity. And that was truly his dream school. And not only did he get to play for his dream school, but he got to bring a national title for the first time in forever to his dream school. And now he's the linebackers coach at his dream school. Like, I mean, I get the emotion there of just kind of like, that kind of sinking in that, like, man, like, that's crazy. Because I'm sure as a kid, much like a lot of us, in the yard throwing the football or whatever, pretending like you're playing for whatever, the Super Bowl, the national, whatever the case may be. And then it all comes to fruition in full circle. And you're kind of sitting there as a 30-year-old man and you're like, wow, it all came true. Right. So more than I could ever imagine. So it's really cool. I just like the intensity of Ben Boulware. And the one thing that, like, and I know Dabo's been criticized for bringing in ex-players as coaches before. Ben Boulware's just different to me. I don't think it's the same thing. And the biggest reason that I feel that way and that I'm so confident that he will be a successful coach is the way that he prepared as a player, the amount of film that he watched, the amount of extra stuff that he just tried to do to maximize. Because as you mentioned, he was athletic, but he was also limited. Like, he didn't have the biggest frame. He wasn't the fastest, right? So instead of being able to kind of lean on all those physical traits that he didn't have, he didn't shy away from that. He just like, well, I'm just going to prepare better than anybody else. So I'm going to know exactly what's going to come so that I can react quicker than anybody else and get a jump on it because I'm not fast.